Hey guys, welcome back to another FX3 Cinema Rig build, and this time I've upgraded something that is super important that you can add to any camera manufacturer build, but this is the very first mini V-mount plate to include USB-C power delivery, which means you can convert any mini V-mount battery into having USB-C power delivery and USB-A quick charge. And that means that you can actually power your newer Sony cameras like this Sony FX3 through USB-C, and you won't lose any of the internal battery inside your actual camera. You'll only be feeding off of the mini V-mount batteries. Plus it has 2 D-tap ports and 2 DC ports on it as well. And get this, the USB-C PD port is actually an input and an output, so you can recharge your mini V-mount batteries through this plate. So you no longer need a separate charger or a D-tap charger or a mini V-mount charger to recharge your batteries. You can actually do it right here with the plate. All right, so let's go ahead and break down this shoulder rig. So this is not your typical small, compact, lightweight rig. And I know I have a tiny FX3 right here. And why is it built up so big? Well, good question. But I have a Sony FX6 as well that I'm shooting on right here. But these are different tools for different purposes. And on a lot of shoots, I have to actually lend out my Sony FX3 for someone to use as a second camera to pair up with my FX6. So this just kind of makes it where we can match, and it makes it very, very versatile for any filmmaker that may jump on my camera. All right, everything is broken down here, and I've gone over this Sony FX3 Cinema Rig build in other videos, so I'll link to it here. But let's go over the newest component to this rig, because that's what we're really here for. So this is the CATEFO VM06. Here's the VM06 plate, which is made completely of aluminum alloy, very, very durable metal construction. The battery kit does come with 2 really long 1/4 20 threaded screws and 4 3/8 screws and the Allen keys to go with them. So these smaller screws could essentially drop down through here, and you can mount that onto some kind of cheese plate. And it has 2 of these thicker 1/4 20 threaded screws that you could drop down through the slot in the back. And then the plate itself has 3 1/4 20 threaded holes on the bottom and the back as well, which is the way that I'm going to be mounting it on here. And you will need to get an additional way to mount this depending on your rig, but I'm going to be using these SMALLRIG 15mm rod clamps and attaching it to the bottom of the mount here. And then on the actual plate itself, you have a D-tap and a DC port on both sides, and then you have USB-A quick charge and USB-C power delivery on the other side. This USB-C PD port is an input or an output port, so you can charge your mini V-mount batteries through this port, or you can provide power delivery with a variety of different outputs, including 20 volt 3 amp, 15 volt 3 amp, 12 volt 3 amp, 9 volt 3 amp, which is what we need to power the Sony FX3 without losing any internal battery power. And it does 5 volt 3 amp, of course, for all your regular accessories like charging your phone or whatever. And the USB-A port is capable of quick charge 3.0, which means that it can also do the same thing that the USB-C PD port can do, including 20 volt 3 amp all the way down to 5 volt 3 amp. The DC ports are 12 volt on this side and 8 volt on this side. And then both of the D-tap ports are the same 14.8 volt. Now the important thing is that this plate is capable of doing the 9 volt 3 amp, which is exactly what my Sony FX3 needs to not lose any internal power. Now keep in mind, you always have to have one of these NPFZ100 batteries in your camera to turn it on. That's just a Sony thing. But if you start off your day at 52% battery on your camera, well, once you plug into this plate, you'll finish off your day at 52% battery in here. You won't lose any internal battery in here. And I've proved all this in another video about the ZG Cine batteries, so I'll be sure to link to that video here if you're interested in checking that out. But this essentially makes it where you can transform any of your V-mount batteries into a USB-C power delivery. So all right, let's go ahead and start building this thing up. Now, one thing to note is that this VM06 doesn't come with any way to actually put it onto 15mm rods. So if you want to go that route, I recommend picking up one of these 15mm rod cheese plates from SMALLRIG and just screwing it to the bottom of the plate. And now I did have to look through a lot of my screws to be able to find one short enough to work in these screw holes, because they're kind of a shallow screw hole. The screws that I actually found that worked the best for me were ones that came off of the SMALLRIG HDMI clamp for another cage that I had. There we go, we'll just tighten down these 1/4-20 threaded screws. Now you can actually put this 15mm rod on the back of the plate as well if you'd rather mount your plate horizontal on your rig, or I like to have it vertical like this. So let's go ahead and jump into the base of this whole thing. All right, so the heart and soul of the entire rig is actually going to be this Tilta cage designed specifically for the Sony FX3. Has a nice handle on the side built into it, NATO rail on the bottom. There's a little screwdriver for it as well. And this cage actually has a 15mm rod base plate designed specifically for it. So the camera actually just slides right into the base plate like this, and then you tighten it down. Next, I'm gonna be using some 12-inch carbon fiber 15mm rods from SMALLRIG. Slide these through and tighten them down. All right, next up, we're gonna add on the SMALLRIG shoulder pad. It just has a cheese plate here and the same 15mm rod clamp on it that we have on the VM06 plate. So I'll just drop this on here and tighten it down. There you go. All right, next up, we drop the CATEFO V-mount plate on here. So we can add on our V-mount battery just to get us a little weight in the back here. And now let's start adding some weight to the front. So first I'm gonna add something to kind of level everything out here. And this is the SMALLRIG 15mm rosette adapter. So it has two of these RE rosettes on the sides. So I'm just gonna drop this right on the front and clamp it down. And then I use two of these Tilta gimbal extension arms. So these were actually designed for the Ronin, but I use them here on my shoulder rig. I find that they work perfectly for this small compact shoulder rig. Another one on this side. There we go. Now we're sitting flat. And then for the handles, I like these wooden SMALLRIG handles. They have the area rosettes on it, so I'm able to just adjust these on the fly. Plus, these handles are super comfortable and just really like ergonomic for your hands. By the way, this SMALLRIG handle also has a record trigger on it too, which I used to always use with my older Sony cameras. I don't really use it too much on here because the cable is not quite long enough to reach the camera from this configuration. But if you have the handle on the camera, it actually works really, really good. All right, so here's where we are currently. We have our battery, camera, handles. Next, let's go ahead and add on the lens, which in this case, we're gonna use this ginormous 70-200 Mark II just to make it nice and beefy. Why not make it as heavy as possible? And then for the matte box, I'm using the Tilta Mirage matte box. And this has the variable neutral ND filter in it as well. So you're able to adjust your exposure on the fly. And this is just a clamp on matte box. So I just clamp it right on the adapter ring there and I'm good to go. Next, this is my favorite handle from SMALLRIG. It has a built-in Allen key in it, tons of mounting options all around, plus a couple cold shoes on the front and the back. And this just slides on the NATO rail on top of the camera, clamps down super quick, and we're on there. This handle can also slide around too. If you loosen up this lever, you can actually spin this around this way and get a little bit more of the balance towards the front of your rig like this, and that feels really good and balanced. But I'm gonna keep it this way for this particular build right now. So guess what I found out recently? That 95% of my viewers are not subscribed to the channel. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying this video. So next, we have this huge heavy lens on here and that puts a lot of stress on the mount, and we have these 15mm rods. So we might as well use a lens support. And this is one I have from Nitsy, came with a couple different adapters, and I'm gonna be using the one that has the little rollers on it, which means means it's universal for any lens, and the little rollers make it where whenever you're focusing or anything like that, if you happen to put it there, that it rotates with the lens. Okay, next we may want to jump into manual focus. So I have a focus gear on the lens, and then I'm going to put this on the right side so I can actually pull focus while I'm holding on to the handle. So this mini follow focus will just slide right onto the 15mm rods. Now the cool thing is, with the position of the handle and this follow focus gear, I'm able to just quickly pull focus right here with my thumb, or maybe I want to use my whole hand, but I'm able to do that right here on the fly. And the cool thing about this 70-200 is it has a direct manual focus mode, so you're able to pop out of autofocus by simply turning the focus ring at any given point. So it just gives you a lot of control over what you're focusing on. Next, I mean, you could go with the top handle that comes with the FX3 if you happen to own an XLR mic like this Deity S Mic 2, and you can go with a configuration like this. I also have the SMALLRIG NATO rail and extension built here onto the handle, and then I've covered it in Velcro for different reasons. One of them being that this handle is kind of creaky and plasticky and it makes a lot of noise, and I find that this soft Velcro kind of reduces some of that handling noise. Also, oftentimes when I'm working with sound guys on bigger shoots, they'll want to put a tentacle sync, which is a time code sync device, and just place it right here on the camera, because the Sony FX3 doesn't have a BNC port or an SDI cable port like on my Sony FX6, and I don't have that BNC adapter for it either. So they'll go in through the 3.5mm jack here, but the Velcro helps with the handling noise and for other people being able to use the camera. Or you can use the traditional mic plugged into the 3.5mm jack like I have here. This is the brand new Comica VM30 mic. This is the world's first wireless shotgun microphone. So you can actually go wireless with it. You can just pop it off here and use this mic with the wireless receiver and plug it in like this. Drop my receiver on there, and now this mic is completely wireless. Or you can put it on here like this, switch the cable over, and now I have the shotgun mic going directly into the camera. So you're able to just switch back and forth between wireless or wired mode with something like this. So this is a really cool microphone, has a bunch of settings on it, gain dial, a couple of different things you can do like safety track. But next, let's go ahead and get the monitor mounted and get everything plugged in. All right, so for the monitor mount, there's a couple of different ways you could do it depending on what your setup is. This handle is cool with a setup like this because you're able to put the monitor on the front if you want to adapt it with a NATO clamp like this. And I'm gonna be using the Atomos Ninja 5 on this because I have the SMALLRIG cage around it. Adds a bunch of mounting points, plus it holds the SSD in here with these little clamps, and it has a clamp for your HDMI cable also. So I highly recommend getting a cage for your Ninja or whatever your monitor is if they make one. But this can simply just slide onto this monitor mount. And then you have a really, really cool configuration where your monitor is right over the top of the lens. So I really like this configuration. But if you remember in a previous video, I talked about my favorite monitor mount of all time. And this is the SMALLRIG Extendable EVF mount. So it can extend any way, it can rotate. You can actually flip your monitor any direction with this thing. So it's really, really cool. I'll show you how it works. So this NATO clamp actually slides onto the NATO rail on the side of this Tilta cage. You just slide it on. Now, whatever monitor you attach needs to have a NATO rail on the bottom, which this monitor actually comes with the NATO rail for doing that as well. But that just makes it where you can slide your monitor on really quickly like this and clamp it down. And then there's all kinds of tightening adjustment levers that are on here. So now this monitor, it can swing down, it can swing up, it can swing back, you know, you can tuck it in your bag or whatever you need. And now you have your monitor out in front of you and you're able to see your image perfectly without having to struggle to have it up over your head or anything like that. So I highly recommend this monitor mount. So this cage is also nice because it has this removable sun hood. So if you're shooting outdoors and you need to get some of the reflection off of your monitor, you can always attach this, and I really use this thing all the time. Super helpful. All right, so all we have to do now is connect a couple cables and we're ready to go start shooting. So first we're gonna connect the USB-C cable from the CATEFO VM06 and run that across to the Sony FX3. You see here, I'm starting off at 71%, and I'm gonna plug the camera in now. Here we go. Okay, so we're at 71% now. Keep that in mind. Now we can plug in our monitor, and I have this Andy Cine NPF battery adapter, which is one of the only battery adapters I've been able to find that works on the Ninja V without using their included adapter. So we'll pop this on here and run this cable down below and connect it to the VM06. Now we can plug in our HDMI. I like using these 4K 60 HDMI cables from SMALLRIG. They're just super thin and they work great. I have a ton of these. All right, now the only other thing to do is maybe just do a little bit of cable management. You can get some cable ties and, you know, tighten some of this up if you want. And now you're ready to go start shooting. So you have your one battery that is able to power up all your devices. So I'm running power delivery into the Sony FX3 here. I'm not using any of the internal battery in the camera now, which is awesome. You are also able to power your Ninja monitor or whatever monitor you're using straight from the D-tap ports or the DC ports. All right, now last thing to do is see if we've lost any internal battery over this time. So we were at 71%. Let's unplug the cable and we're still at 71%. Alternatively, you could turn your camera off and charge your internal battery through this plate as well. Plus, you just have all kinds of flexibility in whatever you need to be rigging out on your camera or charging with this plate. So really versatile plate. I highly recommend checking it out. There'll be links to everything down in the description below if you guys are interested in checking one of these out. But all right guys, shoot for the stars and I'll see you very soon in the next video.